Right, so I think we were going to just start with talking a little bit about us and what we do and how we can hopefully give a bit of a different perspective. So, Sarah, do you want to sort of kick off with that?
Yeah, of course. So this is a bit weird. People that obviously know me and Keira will know that we present together quite a lot. So to be presenting with her on the other side is very, very weird, to say the least. So for those of you that don't know us, we have a property firm based in Leeds. Our clients are purely investors. We've probably got about 5% of those clients that are Mr. and Mrs. Smith buying house. The rest of them are all investors. So we really understand the issues that you're all kind of experiencing at this time. We act for some Hong Kong clients as well. So at the minute, they are loving life based on what's happening in the UK at the minute. And they are still heavily investing with us right now. We also do a lot of bridging. I'm going to say that's Keira's bag because I know how much she absolutely loves her bridging and commercial financing. I wasn't going to mention names, but I thought she'll throw it in there at some point.
Yeah.
And we're currently on all the lender panels. So we've basically had quite a few conversations over the last few weeks since we've been on lockdown, since they started talking about COVID and all of that. With our investors about various things that they are currently experiencing, some really bad advice that they're getting from other solicitors.
Oh, Sarah, you've just locked up. So, okay, carry on.
I'm back. Oh, back. God. I've told the children not to go on YouTube for half an hour, so we'll see how that goes. So I think we're just going to be talking to you about those issues, having a conversation about the various legal issues that you might have in terms of getting documents, witness, that sort of thing. And then obviously if there's any sort of questions, fire them at us, I guess.
Yeah. So interestingly, a lot of the conversations that I've been having with various clients who've been ringing up with it, particularly with new inquiries, saying that they've been ringing around, or they've seen us at Progressive, or they've seen us at events, or somebody's recommended us, and they're coming up with some questions that are questions we've not seen before. So one of the things that we've been told by, or these investors believe, is that we cannot exchange and complete at all at the moment. That is just simply not the case. There are certain situations in which you may decide now is not the time to exchange and complete, but the situations I would anticipate that being a problem is situations where people need to physically move. So if you're exchanging and completing, on completion, you have to give vacant possession of that property. Obviously, if you can't get a removal van and you can't move into your next premises, then you're not going to be able to give vacant possession. And obviously that is going to cause an issue. For our investor clients, 9 times out of 10, the properties are occupied by tenants, or they're not occupied at all. Or you're going to be going in and doing refurbs, that kind of thing. So it's complete myth that at the moment you cannot exchange and complete. Now, if you've got a deal where you have already exchanged with a fixed completion date, then it may be that you're going to need to have some discussions with the other side about how that's actually going to work with regard to whether completion can actually happen on that date. Now, we take lots of advice from people, sort of the Law Society, Bold Legal Group, all of those kind of people who've got clauses and provisions that we can put into contracts should they be needed, in order to enable those deals to still happen once everything comes off pause. Now, if you're just looking at buying something, a cash purchase, or if you've already got a mortgage offer that was issued pre-lockdown, there's absolutely no reason at all why you cannot proceed with that transaction, subject to the caveat about the moving. So we have a lot of investors at the moment who are still purchasing and still completing. The other issue that we seem to come across is obviously this fear in the market, which I do understand. Our view is that the market has paused. It's not dropped yet. Obviously, none of us know what's going to happen, but we've got lots and lots of deals at the moment where we're waiting for mortgage offers. Those buyers are not pulling out. They are just waiting for the offers. And the reason for the lack of offer is the valuers being unable to actually go out and value the properties. Some valuers are doing drive-by valuations, but obviously that comes with risk. If you want a more detailed valuation, and you want the surveyor to go into the house and have a look, which is recommended, then yeah, it's a question of waiting at this time. But we are completing with mortgage purchases where offers have already been issued.
I think some lenders are also doing desktop valuations.
Yeah.
So I think Gary Des is on after us, so it might be Laura. I'm not quite sure, but
Great
they might
question.
be able to delve into it a bit further. But I think it's not your mainstream lenders, it's more your obscure lenders that are now doing the drive-by and the desktop lenders. So it might be that as an investor, you're kind of looking at other alternatives rather than going down the mainstream route, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also the other thing I've noticed, so I was a property solicitor in 2008, 2009, and we all remember what an absolute car crash situation that was. I would say that this is not the same. This feels more like a pause. So the lenders want to lend, they need to lend, the money is there. But at the moment, they just physically, and it's physically because there's no staff in the back office to do the offers. It's physically because the staff they've got are dealing with mortgage holidays. It's physical because the valuers can't go out, but it's not that the funds aren't there and they don't want to lend. So I don't believe that this is in the same banking crisis type situation as we were back in 2008, 2009. So we just want to move on now a little bit. I think with regard to specific legal issues we're having with the deals that are ongoing, and some perhaps sort of, workarounds on those issues so that you can still get your deal over the line. So I think one of the biggies is signing of documents and witnessing of documents. So there are certain documents you can scan and there are certain ones you can't. So your mortgage deed, your guarantees, your transfer deeds have to be wet signatures. And they have to be witnessed, and they can't be witnessed by a member of your family. So given that we're all sort of stuck indoors with members of our family, that is going to be slightly trickier in getting your witness. Now, some lenders will allow you to witness over Skype or FaceTime. We can potentially witness a transfer deed over Skype or FaceTime. So you would show your ID, you'd sign in front of us, and you'd show us your signature, your normal signature, and then we can potentially witness it. It's going to be on a case-by-case basis, but that is something that can be done. Alternatively, I know wills solicitors who are literally handing papers through the window and somebody is witnessing it and handing it back. Again, that is, I think, probably in line with social distancing and something that could be done.
I also think you could be asking neighbours. So I know my neighbours had some wills that I needed to witness, and it was literally a case of they gave it to me through the window. I stood by my car, signed it, and I handed it back, and it's perfectly acceptable. There's a risk, I think, some solicitors argue over the Skype issue, because they say you cannot guarantee that the document that you have sent me is the document that I've physically seen signed and sent. So there are some solicitors that might not do that for you. We obviously take advice on that quite heavily from our Culp and Coffer, which is why we say it's very much based on a case-by-case basis, because you kind of need to adjust how we're working right now based on the social distancing and how we need to get cases over the line.
Yeah, absolutely. There are delays in local searches. So obviously when you do a local search, it's with the local authority, whether that is a personal search, which is where your search provider physically goes to the local authority and looks up the information themselves, or whether it's what's called an official search, which is a search, exactly the same search, but carried out by council employees. At the moment, a lot of councils are closed or they're on skeleton staff. And so those local searches are taking a lot longer. Some of them are just not even coming at all because the staff that they've got, they need for other things. So I think bear that in mind. If you are buying with cash, you could get a search indemnity policy. That's another option that would go, a long way to moving that through. But if you do want local searches or your lender requires local searches, just bear in mind that that is at the moment a delay. Some councils are better than others, but it's just something to bear in mind. Land registry itself, they are still working. They are prioritising. So your post-completion registrations, they were already how long's a piece of string. Now it's like a piece of elastic with no idea. It's just been stretched and stretched. That doesn't prejudice your position though. You've still completed your transaction. But the documents that we need for completion, like your final search, your bankruptcy search, getting copies of the title, we can still do all of that. So that's all still available to us through the solicitors portal. We're not having any issues there. Files waiting for mortgage offers, that's another biggie. So we're ready to go from a legal perspective. As soon as that mortgage offer comes, we request funds, we press go, and we get it over the line as quickly as possible. So all the background work's been done, the inquiries have been raised, the searches have been reviewed, it's basically ready to go, and were you a cash buyer, it would have gone. Those ones, as soon as those valuers are back up and running and you can get your mortgage offer, that should be a really quick 1 to 2 week process maximum, really, to actually get those across the line. It just depends how long. Lenders normally say 5 working days to request funds. I've noticed a few are now saying 7 working days, or they've extended the period between us requesting funds and when they will release funds. But they are releasing funds.
Yeah, I've had one today that was actually 7 to 10 days request.
Right.
So it is extending. Another thing to bear in mind, which we came across this week, Keira, is where our client was obtaining their cash purchase funds from a rate setter account.
Yeah.
So we'd anticipated exchange beginning mid-April, and he'd requested his funds back in March. Rate setter then came to us and said, actually, really, really sorry, there is a massive push for people getting their money out. They're completely backlogged, they've got lack of staff, they've got all sorts of various issues. And we're now looking, bearing in mind it usually takes 30 days to get their money out of the account, we're now looking, if we are lucky, end of May, beginning of June to get those funds. Now we're still able to exchange. So what we do in instances like that is we will say, right, let's give a safe, realistic date. So in this instance, we said the 31st of July, and we've exchanged contracts today and just basically said, look, we'll complete 31st of July or earlier by agreement. So as soon as that money lands, we then have a conversation with the seller that way. It's buy to let, so we don't really need to worry. It's tenanted. So that completion can still go ahead, but it's something to bear in mind when trying to request those funds. Gone are the days where it's just, oh, we'll get our money in 30 days. Yeah. They are experiencing some issues in that respect, which we've not.
I mean, I think it's interesting anyway that people are trying to get their money out of savings accounts. You know, I don't know if this is, you know, as I say, a run on the banks. I'm not sure really how necessary that is, but you know, this guy's genuinely trying to get his deposit funds or his actual cash funds for purchase. But the same would apply if you're in a deposit situation and your deposit date is in a 30 or a 60-day high interest account. Just expect it to take you longer to get those funds out of that bank, and bear that in mind when you're looking at timescales for completion and for exchange. Okay, so we talked to a lot of our investors, and we thought we'd just have a quick chat about some of the things that our investors seem scared about or nervous about. You know, I think all these things have valid, you know, reasons behind them, but it's whether any of them might resonate with the sort of things you're feeling at the moment. So people are worried about slumping prices. This is a bit of a double-edged sword, because the savvy investor, if there is a slight slump in prices at the moment, and we've got clients telling us it's about 10 to 15%, then really this is actually quite a good time to buy. I'd say it's not a good time to buy and flip, because obviously if you're looking at a quick return, that's not necessarily what you want to do. But if you're looking at buying an HMO or a buy-to-let and you wanted to hang on to it for an income-producing vehicle, then really, if you can get it at a cheaper price at this point, then I would say that now is the time to buy. And there are certainly investors out there who are seeing this as an opportunity. Obviously, it depends on everyone's individual circumstance and what cash they've got, and you know what else they've got going on. But there are investors out there who are getting really good deals at the moment. So I think, you know, the slump in prices is real, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad time to buy, depending on what you're buying.
I think it's about how you're viewing the situation, isn't it? Because you'll get the really cautious investor, which I completely understand, because we obviously don't know where we're going to be. Interestingly, just before we actually came on to do the presentation, I read an article about the fact that Taylor Wimpey was saying that they're actually going to start work again on the 27th of April. Yes. So people are starting, you know, things did shut down, and I think we needed to shut down, and we needed to kind of work out how we were going to work, how businesses were going to operate with keeping the social distance going, because we actually don't know how long social distancing needs to last. But things are moving forward. So I think the slump in prices are only really going to last for a very short time. And your savvy investor, if you want to call them that, doesn't matter.
Your braver investor,
your
reckless investor.
Everybody's going to be like, whoa, Keira and Sarah said we needed to go spend our money and buy, and then there's a so no, don't do that. But your more riskier investor is looking at this opportunity saying, it's a small period of time where we can actually maybe use this to our advantage and bargain things down, because you are going to get distressed sellers. You are going to get people that actually at the minute can't financially afford to live in those homes and that are going to want to sell.
And I think the other thing that's going to be quite interesting, I've no view on this, but I'm quite interested in looking at what happens after the 3-month mortgage payment holiday finishes. So, we don't know if the government's going to extend it. I think they'll get a lot of pressure from financial institutions not to extend it past the 3 months.
Can they afford to at the minute, can they?
Well, this is it. So I think, once you get past that 3 months, there's a lot of people, unfortunately, and it is really sad. Yes, there's some people on 80%, but we all know that there are a lot of people not on 80%. And those people can get their mortgage holiday at the moment, but what happens when that mortgage payment kicks back in? Yeah. And I think it's going to actually potentially cause a really sad situation where people are having to sell or downsize or go into rented that may not otherwise have had to. And we don't know how many jobs are going to be available once furlough finishes, and again, that we don't know when that's going to be. And there may be a lot of people who perhaps are not going to be in a position to go back to the job that they were doing before, and that's going to have an implication. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see where we are once the mortgage payment holiday kicks off or comes back on, or stops, I should say, as to what that will do for housing, especially for sellers. And again, there may be opportunities there if you're looking at investing. And so, yes, that again in its very self may cause prices to drop. But again, if you're looking at investing, it may be that there's sellers there who are willing to take less because they're sadly in a position where they don't have a choice.
How are you finding it with commercial purchases then? Do you feel that people are still a bit more risk averse than as opposed to my resi?
I think with my commercial stuff, if anything, is slightly better placed.
Okay.
Because you don't have the same issues of people moving house, so you don't have the break for that. I've got a client who is looking for development finance, and Roma Finance, who is his chosen provider, are very much wanting to lend. He's had meetings with them. They're getting the paperwork out.
Wow, okay.
So there are active people out there wanting to push deals through wherever they possibly can. So I do think the money is there. It is literally just how long it takes for that process, which might take longer than it used to do. So I would say, based on experience, clients are still investing, definitely. The ones that are still going on, a lot of them are on pause, but they're not abortive. People are just waiting until they can get their lending. It might be a good time to speak to brokers, such as Gary, to perhaps get your ducks in a row now so that you can get decisions in principle, or you could have submitted applications or done whatever you can if the institutions are accepting applications. I don't know that. But at least get as much ready so that when everything is back up and running, you can submit those applications for lending really quickly, and then we can get the deals through faster. So this might be a use of that time, is to sort of look around the market and see what is going to be the possible lending streams for you before even you've actually found a property, find out what your capacity is.
I think one thing I've noticed, which is quite sad, because obviously we build relationships with the other side solicitors and that thing, and we try really hard to, because it kind of just smooths the transaction along if everybody's kind of getting on and working together. And one thing I've certainly noticed over the last, I'd say this week in particular more than last week, is a lot of people that I had on the other side are no longer there.
Yes.
So I'll be emailing and I'll be saying, right, okay, where are we? What are we doing with this? And it will be like, oh, I'm really sorry, Julie's been furloughed. And I'm like, right, crap, what do we do now? So I think that's also something to bear in mind, is that we are noticing that because companies are starting to furlough more staff because there's no end in sight as it currently stands, it is delaying when people are getting back to you. And then it also means that you're then getting your replies to inquiries, and then because somebody else has reviewed it, they're then coming back and saying, oh, by the way, I've got an extra 10, 15 that I need to work with. So that also seems to be posing quite a big delay. I noticed on like cash purchases in particular, I'm not dealing with the same person anymore.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And there are a lot of law firms, especially obviously the property departments. I'm sure Matrimonial are rubbing their hands together with glee. Or they will be in a few months. I might diversify. start doing divorce work. But yeah, you know, there are certain departments where, I mean, wills and probate, for example, are, you know, buoyant. Was sad to say, but that's just the situation. Property, not so much. But I think what's interesting is that from our perspective, because we're a smaller firm at the moment, because our overheads are very low, we can work from home, the infrastructure's in place, so we can do all our accounts, our completions and everything. We haven't furloughed anybody, and we're not intending to. So we have got capacity to do the work. We're doing the work. We've had clients ring and say, look, I tried to get my other solicitor, that person isn't working there anymore at the moment, can you do the work? So, you know, again, when you're trying to think of a positive spin on this horrible situation and some opportunities, there are opportunities for people who can kind of stick with it. It's not easy for us. You know, we're in a very different place to where we were 2 months ago or a month ago even. But there are, I think, from our perspective, some elements of the way we operate. We will operate remotely anyway. We can do our job from anywhere. We don't have to be in the office. Our files are electronic. All those kinds of things means that we can provide the seamless service that we were doing before. And so I think we're quite lucky in that regard, and luckier than some of the big firms who've got massive staff overheads. I think they're going to struggle far more, really. So just a little bit on social distancing. So obviously, if you are buying investment properties, obviously what Sarah said earlier about Wimpy, my understanding is that a construction team can go into an empty property as long as they, amongst themselves, practice social distancing and stick to the rules. They can go in and do the work. I've had some construction type clients who do a lot of this saying they've had difficulties in getting materials from builders merchants, but I think that might be getting slightly easier. So that was a bit of a stumbling block at one point, but in theory you can still go in and do your refurb work, get your refurb teams in there if they're willing to do it. So, you know, you could be using that time to be doing that kind of work, and then you're up and running once things start to ease off a bit. So we just want to think just a couple of things about sort of longer term, really. So we think potentially it's a good time to invest 10 to 15% perhaps savings on properties prior to the lockdown situation. We've talked about getting a decision in principle. Again, anything you can do at that end to get all your funding lined up. So when you see a good deal, you see a bargain, you're in a really good position to act. The other thing that people may need to start looking at, and which is, again, a sad situation, is I think there'll be an upsurge in repossession properties. So I think, I think in the coming months, I think that there will be more and more properties that are available from lenders selling in repossession. So you may be able to find some good deals there. Auctions, again, you know, people needed to just sell really quick and just get whatever they can for their properties. That might be a good thing. If you know property sources, they may be able to be, you know, looking for good, sort of slightly below market value deals if that's what you're into. And then the other thing that we talked about quite a lot, Sarah, wasn't it, was about the rental and what this is going to do for first-time buyers and things.
So we have a great friend and property source who obviously sources properties down in London, and he was saying that they have actually noticed a massive increase in his investors. Because he was saying, so what happens is you get these first-time buyers, it's going to be very difficult to get lending now, and especially because they're not lending as much as they did. So before, where we were getting, you know, 75%, 80%, you're now, what you were looking at, about 60%, I think, my lowest one that I had. And obviously, as a first-time buyer, it's very difficult to find that 40% deposit to pay on a house, and it was difficult before this, so it's even harder now. So we found that a lot of people are now looking at HMOs, which are a lot less cheaper than owning your own, or rental accommodation and things like that. So we actually think that this will generate for an investor a lot more buy-to-lets, a lot more HMO opportunities, because you'll get those young professionals that are looking for that. I know Chris Hamilton spoke earlier, and he was saying a lot of people will be looking at flats that actually have a place for you to work from home, because it might be that this is the situation we face now for the next future. Exactly. And, you know, we don't know where we'll be if there's another peak or what happens. We're literally stuck in limbo. But, you know, it's like we said, it's all about looking at it more as an opportunistic approach rather than the constant doom and gloom.
Yeah. I mean, what I think is going to be interesting, especially for your first time buyer scenario, is that, you know, worryingly, the people who were perhaps saving for their deposits are having to utilise that money to live off.
Yeah.
The people who were saving for deposits or even getting into debt, so they're even, you know, they may be using some savings and not able to save, and they're having to put things on credit cards. So this is just delaying the opportunity they've got then to save that deposit to get onto the housing market. Even rental properties are not necessarily, you know, a massive saving from a mortgage payment, but an HMO room for a young person means that they will be able to try and rebuild those savings or pay off those debts quicker. And so I think there may be some, you know, demand for those rooms to enable those people to get in a good position to have their deposits to purchase their properties. So I think that may have a knock-on effect if people at the moment are using up their savings to live from, and not able to add to those savings. Interestingly, we do a lot of work with Hong Kong investors. And what I'm finding is that my Hong Kong investors are still buying. They still seem quite keen. I've got lots and lots of clients who are buying off-plan flats, which I know a lot of UK investors are less certain about. But again, it just shows that the appetite is there for people to continue to purchase. So I think that's quite a positive note that you know, there are people in the market who are seeing this as a blip. And are not thinking it's the end of the world, and they're therefore trying to get themselves in a good position moving forward to continue with that work. And serious investors, so the guy that Sarah was talking about earlier, his top 6 clients are doing more than they were, not less.
So I think he was saying it will actually ironically be his busiest 6 months, because these people are looking at this as to be buying properties that would probably cost them 20% more, when now they can buy it 20% less, refurb it, turn it into an HMO, and see a massive return on their investment.
Yeah, so I think that's about all we've got to say, really. I don't know if there's any questions. I don't know if Joshua... hello, Joshua.
I'm back.
Can I just add, please, if you want to donate, we'd really appreciate it. I'm wearing blue, so you've got no excuse. You have to donate to the NHS if you would. They've helped me out and my little boy who had a feeding tube when he was a baby, and they saved his life. So I've just, you know, it's a brilliant thing that those people do. So if you can donate, that would be really lovely.
Yeah, that's it, guys. You know, you got the bit.ly link /help the NHS. Let's get some donations in. And what questions do we have? So we've got one about your contact details. Someone said, "Wow, you seem super efficient. I wish all solicitors were like this."
We don't just leave it.
So definitely put your contact details on there.
Yeah, so I don't know where our contact details are. Joshua, do you have them anywhere, or should I just quickly run through our email?
Yeah, if you put your email address on, and we can type it out in the comments.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that. Can I just...
Yeah, what's the email address?
Yeah, so it's Keira, which is Keira at cpdlaw.co.uk, and Sarah at cpdlaw.co.uk.
With a H.
Perfect.
Sarah with an H. Yeah.
Perfect. So anyone looking to work with you guys, send them an email. I'll be more than happy to help. Now we've got a question. So if you allow a vendor to stay post-completion until they can move, are we vulnerable to any squatting issues?
So it depends on how you do it. If you are purchasing with a mortgage, the chances are your lender won't allow it. If it's a buy-to-let property, your lender might allow it, but you would need to notify them. If you are buying cash, you can do it, but you would need to enter into a license to occupy on the day of completion. And that license to occupy will then make it very clear what rights you have to get that person out. But don't just let them stay. It has insurance implications, it has mortgage implications, but yes, you can, provided you put in place a license or, you know, an appropriate agreement in place.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great information there. And having that, if someone forgot to put a license in place, that could have quite expensive implications. So speak with your solicitor, speak with you guys, and get the right paperwork in place.
Just to say as well, I'm getting lots of inquiries about lease options at the moment. So there's lots of people out there, I think, who are doing the lease option thing, and it's something that I do fairly regularly. So another, a lease option is another good option where you've got, landlords who just want to walk away and just don't want to have to think about it. And that seems to be something that's really, really sort of a growing area. And at the moment, if it's also potentially quite a good strategy, because then you are able to generate some income, and also the option element is an option to buy. So that's important. So it's a lease option, but the option is actually really important because it gives you the opportunity to buy. So you can hedge your bets a little bit and then maybe buy when you see what the market does in a couple of years. But you don't have to buy, you have the option. So lease options is something else I'm getting a lot of inquiries about at the moment.
What would you say your kind of biggest tip is for somebody looking at getting a lease option agreement in place?
So I think the biggest tip for me is, if you can avoid doing it with somebody who's got a mortgage, brilliant. They work best with unencumbered properties. With mortgage properties, it is far more complicated and much riskier. So my tip would be, try and find a property where it's got actually a tiny mortgage on it or no mortgage at all. You can do it the other way, but my biggest tip would be to try and do it without.
I also think, Joshua, it's quite important. It's amazing how many people go into WH Smith's and buy a lease option pack of their own. And I think it's quite important. We've had some cases before that have landed, thankfully, on Keira's desk and not mine, where you've somebody's drafted it and it's completely gone tits up and they're now like, I don't know what to do. It's really important that you take the proper advice.
And lease options are untested in court. So there's not been any cases yet about enforcing lease options or where it's all gone wrong and what are we going to do and what are the rights. And so in that respect, we've no legal precedent to be able to say, well, this is what the court would say in this scenario. So, you know what happens if somebody won't complete. We know what happens if sellers don't give the correct replies on inquiries. We know what the recourse is. With a lease option at the moment, we don't know what those implications are, especially if the mortgage on there and they default on the mortgage. You might have spent a lot of money under your lease option on doing that house, and the mortgagee in possession sells it above your head. So you do need to get really proper specialist advice on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So do not get your lease option agreements from WH Smith's. I hope all you guys have kept the receipts for those so you can return them. So we've got a question. Can we live in a lease option property?
Yes, I don't see why not. If you've got the long lease over the entire property and then you split it into rooms, which is what most people do to increase the amount of income, you could take an AST of one of those rooms. I don't see that being a necessary problem. You just have to be a bit careful because you can't have landlord and tenant being the same person. So if you take your lease option in Mr. Brown and then Mr. Brown wants an AST, that might not work. You might have to take your lease option in Brown Limited and then you grant an AST to Mr. Brown as an individual. But it's all about insurance as well. So legal side of it, there's quite a lot you can do legally. A lot of it's contracts. So if it goes wrong, you sue. But what you do need to think about is your landlord insurance. So it may be that your insurer would not allow you to live in the property. So it's those kinds of things as well. Please bear in mind, it's not just a legal question. Most of the time it's an insurance issue, potentially.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, that's a really great answer. That pretty much wraps this up. Thank you very much for both of your time. It's been really appreciated.
It's been a pleasure.
We've got some donations come through as well.
Thank you,
I certainly
guys.
learned a bit there. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much.
Both soon.
Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Bye.
You too. Bye. Perfect. So that really was a great kind of legal summary of a lot of the issues that are going on at the moment, and it really highlights that there are still opportunities out there and you can still act on those with the right legal team in place.